The air is cool, thick with the scent of earth, with smoke and the distant sound of rustling leaves. It's the kind of evening where the stars seem close to the ground, and the moonlight spills over the hills, casting long shadows across the village. The fire crackles softly in the center of the gathering space, its warmth a comfort against the chill of night. The villagers have all come together around the fire, the low hum of conversation mingling with the crackle of the flames. The sky, now a deep velvet blue, feels both vast and intimate, like a canvas where the past and the present blend together. The village is small and quiet, nestled between the slopes of rolling hills, where time seems to slow down. Simple stone cottages with thatched roofs, the landscape, their smoke rising lazily into the evening air. The fields, once lush and green, now were the weary marks of seasons past, but there's still a sense of resilience in the way the crops grow, stubborn against the odds. In the distance, a stream glistens softly in the moonlight, and the sound of it trickling over stones creates a peaceful rhythm. Mariam is a woman in her mid-30s, with soft, dark eyes that often seem to be lost in thought. Her hair, once full and thick, has been pulled back into a simple knot, strands escaping to frame her face. She has a quiet grace about her, but something in the set of her shoulders and the way she holds herself suggests a hidden burden. Her clothes are worn from years of hard work, yet she moves with quiet dignity, as though she's carrying the weight of something deeper than physical labor. Mariam has always been the pillar of her family, the one who sacrificed her youth, her dreams, and her own desires for the sake of her loved ones. Growing up, she was taught that her worth was in what she could give, what she could do for others. Her kindness, however, was often mistaken for weakness. While others saw her as a dependable one, the one who never faltered, few saw the hidden pain in her eyes. She gave everything for her family, her time, her energy, her heart, but in return, she felt unseen, unappreciated. As the evening winds drift through the trees, Mariam sits quietly by the fire, watching the flames flicker. She has always been one to care for others, but tonight, as the fire casts shadows across her face, there is a flicker of doubt in her heart. How much more can she give? What will be left of her once she has given all? She doesn't dare speak these thoughts aloud. After all, she is a strong one, the one who always puts others before herself. But deep within, she longs for something more, for recognition, for love, for someone to see her beyond her sacrifices. Unknown to most, Mariam once had a passion for painting. As a child, she would steal moments by the riverbank, her fingers stained with ink as she captured the world around her on scraps of old paper. But her talent was never nurtured, never valued. Life swept her away into the demands of family and duty, and she left behind her brushes, her colors, and the quiet joy she found in creating. Now, sitting by the fire, Mariam's fingers twitch as if they still remember the motions of holding a paintbrush. The longing to paint again stirs within her, but she suppresses it. There's no time for such things, she tells herself, always putting others first. In this moment, as Mariam sits by the fire, many in the audience can likely relate. Perhaps they have also known the quiet weight of duty, the way it can slowly chip away at one's sense of self. Perhaps they, too, have given so much to others that they've forgotten what it feels like to take something for themselves. As Mariam looks into the fire, she allows herself a moment to think of her life before all the sacrifices. Her eyes soften, a brief smile touching her lips as memories of simpler times flash through her mind. There was a time when she was carefree, when she could dream without limits. But now, those dreams feel distant, like a faded painting she can no longer recreate. Yet, there's a deep, unspoken hope in her heart. One day, perhaps, there will be a moment when she can claim a piece of her own life back. Mariam was born into a humble family, the eldest of 5 siblings. Her father, a hard-working farmer, spent long hours toiling in the fields, while her mother, a gentle and caring woman, kept the home warm and inviting. From a young age, Mariam felt the weight of responsibility upon her shoulders. Her mother often whispered in her ear, "You must help your father, dear. One day, this will all fall on you." These words were etched in Mariam's heart, shaping her into the dutiful daughter she became. Her childhood was one of simple joys. Her father's stories under the stars, the quiet evenings spent with her siblings by the hearth. But Mariam always knew that she would never have the freedom to chase after her own dreams. Though she was expected to help with chores and care for her younger siblings, Mariam had a secret gift, a talent for painting that she discovered when she was just a child. When she was 7, she found an old piece of charcoal in the barn and began sketching the world around her. The trees, the river, the birds flying above, all became subject of her art. Her family was too busy to notice her talent. Her father saw her drawings as nothing more than distractions, while her mother, although kind-hearted, encouraged her to focus on her real work around the house. Still, Mariam continued to sketch in secret, finding solace in her art when life became too overwhelming. As Mariam grew older, the demands of life became heavier. Her father fell ill, and the weight of the family's needs fell entirely on her shoulders. The once lively village she grew up and began to face harder times. Crops failed, the community struggled, and Mariam's responsibilities increased. By the time she was a young woman, her passion for painting had faded into the background. She had promised herself that she would care for her family, that her dreams could wait. The little sketches and paintings she had created were left abandoned in forgotten corners of the home. She became the heart of the household, her dreams swallowed by the needs of those she loved. As Mariam continues to care for her family, a quiet ache grows inside her. She loves them deeply, her siblings, her parents, but there's a hollow place within her, an emptiness that no amount of sacrifice can fill. Each day, she pours herself into her work, her responsibilities, but each day she feels like a piece of herself is slipping away. The woman she once was, full of dreams and passions, feels like a distant memory. At night, when the house is quiet and everyone else is asleep, Mariam sits by the window, looking out at the moonlit hills. Her fingers often twitch as if yearning to hold a paintbrush, to capture the world in colors once again. But she pushes the thought aside, telling herself there is no time for such things. Her family needs her. The thought of painting, of returning to the woman she once was, feels selfish, indulgent. Yet, in the quiet of the night, when all is still, she can't help but wonder what would feel like to reclaim her own life, even if just for a moment. Every morning, Mariam rises before the sun, silently beginning her work. She tends to the fields, cares for her younger siblings, cooks, cleans, and does everything that is expected of her. Her days are spent in service, but inside her, a quiet voice asks, "What about me? What about my heart, my dreams?" Yet, she never speaks these words aloud. She is taught that duty is all that matters. The joy of personal fulfillment is a luxury she cannot afford. It is not her place to desire anything for herself. She believes that her life must be dedicated to others. On rare occasions, Mariam sneaks away to the riverbank, where she once painted. The gentle flow of the water and the rustling of leaves bring her a sense of peace she cannot find anywhere else. Though she no longer paints, the act of sitting quietly, listening to the world around her, stirs something deep inside. For a brief moment, she feels like the woman she once was, the one who could dream without limits, the one who found joy in simple things. She recalls the days when she would sit by the river, her fingers smudged with paint, her mind free. Those memories are bittersweet, but they're the only thing that keeps her going. Those brief moments when the weight of the world lifts, and she remembers who she truly is, even if only for a heartbeat. Mariam's internal struggle is one that many can relate to, sacrificing one's dreams for the sake of family, feeling like a part of oneself is lost in the process. How many of us have put aside our passions, our hopes, for the sake of others? How many have felt the quiet ache of longing, the desire to hold on to something that feels like us amidst the noise of life? Through Mariam, the audience sees her own reflections, how easy it is to forget ourselves in the service of others, and how hard it can be to reclaim a sense of self in the midst of duty. As the fire crackles in the background, Mariam's internal monologue quietly asks, "Will they ever see me for who I truly am? Will anyone ever appreciate the woman behind the sacrifices?" Her vulnerability, her longing for recognition, tugs at the heart. It is a universal question, one that every person is asked at some point in their life. Do others see me? Do they understand what it cost me to give so much of myself to them? One summer morning, As Mariam walked the market to sell produce, she met a man named Adam. He was new to the village, a wandering artisan who made a living carving intricate designs into wood and stone. His arrival was marked by quiet curiosity among the villagers, who marveled at his craftsmanship and enigmatic demeanor. Adam, with his sun-kissed skin, kind eyes, and a calm yet confident voice, struck a stark contrast to the bustling villagers. He worked with precision, creating beauty from the simplest materials. Mariam noticed him sitting under the shade of a banyan tree, carving what looked like a bird taking flight. Intrigued, she lingered nearby, drawn to his work in a way she couldn't explain. Noticing her quiet presence, Adam smiled and said, "It takes a patient heart to see the beauty in things others overlook." The word struck her deeply, though she couldn't muster a reply. Instead, she nodded and hurried away, her heart inexplicably lighter. Over time, Adam and Mariam crossed paths more frequently, whether at the market or by the riverbank. Their brief exchanges carried a warmth that Mariam hadn't felt in years. Unlike others, Adam didn't demand or expect anything from her. Instead, he noticed the weariness in her eyes, the way she carried herself with quiet strength, and the unspoken longing she seemed to hide. One day, as they sat by the riverbank, Adam spoke softly. "The world is loud, but in the quiet, we often find our true selves. Tell me, Mariam, when do you feel most alive?" His words caught her off guard, and she hesitated before replying, "I used to paint long ago, but that was another life, one I can't return to." Adam's eyes lit up with understanding. "Why not? The world hasn't forgotten your gift, even if you have. Sometimes we bury treasures in our hearts, thinking they are lost forever, but treasures can always be unearthed." A week later, Adam appeared at Mariam's doorstep with a small package wrapped in burlap. Inside was a set of paints and brushes, slightly worn but lovingly cared for. "I found these in the market," he said, his voice steady. "They reminded me of the way your eyes lit up when you spoke of painting. Perhaps it's time you found your colors again." Mariam's hands trembled as she held the brushes, her emotions a whirlwind of gratitude and hesitation. "I can't," she whispered, her voice breaking. "There's no time for such things. My family—" Adam interrupted gently. "Your family is your strength, but so is your heart, Mariam. Don't let one silence the other." His words lingered in her mind long after he had left, echoing in the quiet moments of her days. Adam became a quiet but steadfast presence in Mariam's life. He never pressured her, but offered gentle reminders of the beauty she once saw in the world. When she hesitated to pick up a brush, he encouraged her with stories of his own struggles, how he, too, had nearly abandoned his craft during a difficult time, only to realize that creating was as essential as breathing. "Our gifts are not just for us, Mariam," he said one evening by the fire. "They are the bridges we build to connect with the world, to leave behind something that says, 'I was here. I mattered.'" Slowly, Mariam began to paint again, not in grand gestures, but in small, quiet moments when her chores were done and the house was still. Her first strokes were hesitant, her lines uneven, but with each passing day, her confidence grew. Adam's encouragement gave her the courage to reclaim a part of herself she had thought lost forever. Adam's presence in Mariam's life wasn't about romance. It was about recognition. He saw her not as a caretaker or a dutiful daughter, but as an individual with her own dreams and struggles. This recognition was a balm to her weary soul, a reminder that she was more than the sacrifices she made. Their conversations were like a breath of fresh air, filled with stories, laughter, and quiet reflections. Adam's unwavering belief in her ignited a spark within Mariam, giving her the courage to dream again, even if only in small, stolen moments. As Mariam's paintings began to take shape, she felt a glimmer of the joy she once knew. She still carried the weight of her responsibilities, but for the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope, to believe that she could be both a caretaker and an artist, both selfless and true to herself. As time passed, Mariam's family's demands grew heavier. Her younger siblings required more attention. Her father's health continued to decline, and her mother leaned on her for nearly everything. Each day became a race against time, cooking, cleaning, and running errands with barely a moment to breathe. But now, there was something else that tugged at her heart, her art. In the quiet hours of the night, Mariam would paint by the dim light of an oil lamp, her strokes deliberate but weary. She hid her creations under her bed, afraid her family would dismiss her passion as frivolous or selfish. One day, Adam noticed the exhaustion etched on Mariam's face. "You're spreading yourself too thin," he said softly. "You can't pour from an empty cup." Mariam smiled faintly. "They need me, Adam. If I don't do it, who will?" "But what about you?" he pressed. "Your dreams? Your happiness? Will you keep burying them under everyone else's needs?" Mariam sighed. "Happiness is a luxury I can't afford." Adam frowned but said no more. He sensed that Mariam was at a crossroads, though she couldn't see it yet. One evening, Mariam's youngest brother, Hassan, stumbled upon her hidden paintings. Wide-eyed, he ran to their mother, clutching a canvas of a vibrant, sunlit meadow. "Look what Mariam made," he exclaimed. Her mother's face darkened as she examined the painting. "So, this is what you do while the rest of us work ourselves to the bone," she said sharply when Mariam returned home. "You waste time on this nonsense instead of helping your family?" Mariam's cheeks flushed with shame and anger. "It's not nonsense," she whispered. It's a part of me." Her mother scoffed. "A part of you? And what about us, Mariam? We need your hands, not your paintings." That night, Mariam sought solace by the river, where she found Adam waiting. Tears streamed down her face as she recounted what had happened. "Maybe they're right," she said bitterly. "Maybe my art is just a waste of time." Adam shook his head firmly. "No, Mariam, your art is your soul speaking. If you silence it, you silence yourself." His words lit fire in her chest, but doubt still lingered. "I can't abandon my family, Adam. They need me, and you need you," he replied. "You can't serve others while losing yourself. There must be a balance." Mariam returned home determined to prove that her art could coexist with her responsibilities. She began painting during stolen moments of rest, pouring her emotions onto the canvas. Word of Mariam's talent spread after one of her paintings, a gift for a neighbor, caught the eye of a visiting merchant. He offered to showcase her work in a nearby town, promising recognition and financial reward. Mariam's heart leaped at the opportunity, but when she told her family, they reacted with disbelief and anger. "You're abandoning us as strangers?" her mother accused. "It's not abandonment." Mariam pleaded. "If my art sells, it can help us all." But her words fell on deaf ears. Her family's resentment weighed heavily on her, forcing her to choose between their approval and her dreams. Mariam's decision to showcase her work created a rift in the family. Her siblings, once close and supportive, now saw her as selfish. Her mother's disappointment was palpable, and her father's silence was the hardest to bear. "You were supposed to take care of us, Mariam," her father finally said one evening, "not chase after foolish dreams." Mariam felt as though the ground beneath her was crumbling. She turned to Adam, who remained her steadfast ally, but even his encouragement couldn't ease the ache of her family's betrayal. As Mariam prepared for the exhibition, she began to notice subtle changes in herself. She felt a growing sense of pride and determination, but also a creeping fear of losing her family forever. Adam warned her of the dangers of pride. "Remember, Mariam," he said, "your art is a gift, but it's not the only thing that defines you. Don't let it blind you to what truly matters." His words stayed with her, a haunting echo as she stood at the edge of a life-changing decision. The day of the exhibition arrived, and Mariam's paintings drew admiration and awe from everyone who saw them. The merchant kept his promise, and her work was displayed in the finest hall of the nearby town. Visitors praised her skill, marveling at the depth of emotion in her art. For the first time, Mariam felt the warmth of recognition. Strangers appreciated what her family dismissed as a waste of time. She returned home with a small bag of coins from her sales and a heart brimming with newfound confidence. Mariam's success began to change her. The once self-effacing young woman, who worked tirelessly for her family, now spent more time perfecting her craft and tending to their needs. She began to wear fine scarves purchased from her earnings, a stark contrast to her previous modest attire. Her siblings noticed. "Mariam doesn't care about us anymore," her younger sister whispered one evening. "She only cares about her paintings." Her mother, too, grew distant. "So, you think a few coins make you better than us?" she said bitterly when Mariam tried to hand her the earnings. "We need you here, Mariam, not out there chasing fame." Adam watched Mariam's transformation with quiet unease. One evening, he confronted her by the riverbank. "Mariam, you've changed," he said gently. "The girl who painted under the moonlight to escape her sorrows is now someone I barely recognize." Mariam frowned. "I've finally found my worth, Adam. Why can't you be happy for me?" "I am," he said, "but at what cost? Your family feels abandoned, and you're drifting further from the things that once grounded you." Mariam shrugged off his concerns, telling herself that he didn't understand what it was like to finally be seen. One day, Mariam discovered that several of her paintings were missing. Panic set in as she searched the house, only to learn that her family had sold them without her permission. "You had no right," Mariam shouted, tears streaming down her face. "And you had no right to neglect us," her mother retorted. "We needed the money for the harvest. Your paintings aren't just yours. They belong to all of us." Mariam felt as though her heart had been ripped from her chest. The betrayal stung deeply, not just because of the stolen paintings, but because her family saw her art as nothing more than commodity. Broken and angry, Mariam turned to Adam. She expected him to side with her, to fuel her indignation, but his words cut deeper than any betrayal. "Mariam," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow, "your family is wrong, but so are you. You've let pride cloud your heart. You've forgotten why you started painting in the first place, to find peace, to express what words couldn't. Now your art has become something else entirely." Mariam recoiled. "You think I'm selfish?" "I think you're lost," Adam replied. "And unless you find your way back, you'll lose more than your paintings. You'll lose yourself." Mariam was torn. Should she continue pursuing her art, risking further alienation from her family? Or should she abandon her dreams to restore peace at home? As the tension within her grew, so did the tension between her family and Adam. They resented his influence over her, accusing him of filling her head with foolish ideas. The once harmonious bond that held Mariam's world together now felt irreparably fractured. The conflict between Mariam and her family erupted one fateful evening. Her siblings, resentful of her growing independence, accused her of abandoning them for the approval of strangers. Her mother, still bitter about Mariam's absence in the fields, declared, "Your art may fill your heart, but it does nothing to fill our stomachs." Overwhelmed, Mariam lashed out. "I've done nothing but sacrifice to this family. Can't I have something that's mine for once?" Her words echoed to the small house, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. It was a moment of bitter truth, exposing wounds long left to fester. After confrontation, Mariam sought solace by the riverbank, hoping to find Adam waiting for her as he always had. But he wasn't there. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no sign of him. Rumors reached her that Adam had left the village. He had been heartbroken by Mariam's words and the growing distance between them. His absence left an emptiness Mariam couldn't ignore. It was as though the one constant in her life had been stripped away, leaving her adrift in a sea of anger and regret. One day, while cleaning her late father's old trunk, Mariam stumbled upon a tattered journal. Inside were sketches, familiar and hauntingly beautiful. Her father had been an artist, too, hiding his talent in favor of providing for the family. The realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. Her family's dismissal of her art wasn't born of disdain but fear. They feared her art would lead her down a path of hardship, just as it had for her father. Tears streamed down her face as she recognized the sacrifices her family had made to survive. She had been so consumed by her own dreams that she'd failed to see theirs. The annual village festival approached, a time when the community came together to celebrate the harvest. Mariam decided to contribute her art to the festival, but not for profit. Instead, she created a mural on the walls of the community hall, depicting the struggles and triumphs of the villagers, including her family. When the mural was unveiled, her family stood in stunned silence. The painting captured their sacrifices, their resilience, and their love. Her mother approached her with tears in her eyes. "Mariam," she said softly, "we only want to protect you. We never hated your art. We were afraid it would take you away from us." Mariam fell to her knees, sobbing, "And I pushed you all away because I thought you didn't care." The two embraced, their shared grief and love dissolving the walls that had grown between them. Days later, Mariam found Adam waiting for her by the riverbank. His familiar smile returned as she approached him. "I heard about the mural," he said. "I knew you'd find your way back." Mariam smiled through her tears. "I was lost, Adam, but I found my way, and I owe so much of it to you." They sat together under the moonlight, just as they had in the beginning, their friendship stronger than ever. In the days following the festival, Mariam began to rebuild the bond she had strained with her family. She joined her siblings in their daily chores, not as an obligation, but as a gesture of love and gratitude. Her siblings, in turn, began to take an interest in her art, asking her to paint small pieces for their rooms or as gifts for friends. Her mother, though still reserved, often sat quietly watching Mariam paint by the firelight. One evening, she said softly, "Your father will be proud of you, Mariam. You've given us all a piece of him back." With her family's support, Mariam found herself drawn back to the riverbank, where she spent countless hours reflecting. Adam, ever the loyal companion, returned to her side. "You were right to leave," Mariam admitted one evening. "I needed to see what I had before I could truly value it." Adam smiled, his gentle wisdom intact. Sometimes, the heart needs silence to hear what it's been saying all along. Mariam's art became a fixture in the village. She painted murals for festivals and illustrated the tales of the elders, preserving the village's stories for future generations. Her work became a symbol of resilience and unity, bringing pride to her family and joy to the community. She never sought wealth or fame, but took solace in knowing her art brought people together. One day, as Mariam painted a portrait of her family in the golden glow of a harvest afternoon, she paused to reflect. Her sacrifices had not been in vain. They had forged a deeper understanding of love, loyalty, and the balance between personal dreams and familial duty. She whispered to herself, "Dreams are meant to soar, but the heart must always find its way home." The tale of Mariam teaches us that sacrifice without understanding can lead to resentment, but reconciliation can mend even the deepest wounds. Pursuing one's passion is noble, but not at the cost of forgetting those who supported you along the way. True strength lies in humility, acknowledging your mistakes, and making amends is the path to lasting happiness. And so Mariam's story ends where it began, by the riverbank under a starlit sky, surrounded by love and understanding. Dear reader, have you ever let pride or misunderstanding create distance between you and someone you love? Perhaps Mariam's journey can inspire you to bridge that gap. Take a moment to reflect. Who might you need to forgive or seek forgiveness from today?